Just started to consume me as I did my own research and was trying to understand had, trends like this occurred in other places, would fraud continue to grow at the scale that, we both sort of assumed it would? And the underlying thread throughout that the whole time was just like, if it does, think about all of the people and businesses that are going to be impacted as a result.
I am so excited to welcome our listeners to 2026. I'm Iain Bryant, your host, and here is a brand new episode of Closing Time. Super excited to welcome a very special guest, Tyler Adams, the CEO of CertifID. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me, Ian. Excited to be here.
We are, as I think the whole country is, facing quite the cold front here. So, Tyler, I thought I would put on my special sort of tech outfit. I know I'm in title, but could I pass for a tech executive with this little vest in Austin?
Yeah, the vest is a nice touch, especially given the weather outside. Way to go, Ian.
This is a little different than what we've done on previous closing times. So typically, as you know, we'll sit down with an agent and go through their story, but I thought it was really important in light of the opportunities and challenges in front of our agents here stretching before us in the new year, to get in front of them quickly some value add discussions. And when I think about what CertifID does and your leadership there, I think it's really important for them to hear the story, frankly, hear very explicitly about the products, and most importantly, the problems that you're seeking to solve for title agents and consumers every day. So thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, no, appreciate you changing up the flow and slotting us in here to kick off the year. We're gonna be a little New Year's resolution story here today.
I like it. So help us to get to know you just a little bit, Tyler. Maybe tell us about your professional journey and how, sort of the months and years and experiences culminated in you leading CertifID as CEO.
Yeah, happy to. I actually started my career in consulting. I studied at Boston University and I had a degree in operations and technology management. And I fell in love with this idea of enabling companies to perform better by implementing great technology. Our job was to go into large organizations, help them identify problems, and help them try to solve them by implementing technology that could make them faster, cheaper, more efficient, more collaborative, more connected. And I loved it. I had a lot of fun. One of my first clients was actually Kellogg's cereal. And I spent nearly 5 years traveling to Battle Creek, Michigan, which is a place that, I wouldn't recommend as a travel destination, especially this time of year. But I grew very fond of it through the experience. And the experience was going in and helping essentially the business unit that I worked in was for marketing. And Kellogg Cereal spends more than $1 billion, or at the time they did, in marketing alone. And our job was to help make the marketing across all 130 brands at the time faster, cheaper, more efficient through the use of technology. And it was really fascinating because at the time, Kellogg actually did a lot of still traditional marketing, meaning that they were just like going and meeting with news publications and asking to put ads into their magazines or onto their websites, whatever it was. But like there was no concept of like digital performance, knowing exactly where every dollar was going at every minute. And so I got to do this journey with them of implementing all of these interesting pieces of technology to make them perform and improve. Loved it, had a great exposure and experience there. But I actually started to, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but I started to feel a desire to be on the other side of the table. And that table was the people who were coming in and pitching us on their technology and saying, hey, you should use our technology. We can help solve this problem. We can do it. This is how it works. This is how it operates. And I just thought it was so cool to see these businesses coming in. And when you pitch Kellogg cereal, you bring your A team, no matter how big your organization. And so I got to see hundreds of pitches from some of the most elite sort of tech providers at the time And it was just like so inspiring. And so I decided to take my career and move a little bit closer towards solving those problems by developing technology. And so I actually took a little stint, developed a couple of pieces of tech myself that were all wildly unsuccessful. And then I quickly realized that not having the money behind a solution was also a problem. And so I went back into consulting, and but this time it was with Boston Consulting Group. And at BCG, I worked for a really unique team, which was called their Digital Ventures Group. And what we did was, well, we partnered with big brands, but we also helped them develop solutions. And so I got this like hybrid of, being able to still problem identify, but now actually have engineers, designers, product people solutioning to create the solutions for those organizations. And that I fell in love with. I was like, all right, this is where I need to be in terms of actually doing the development. And while I was there, what brings me a little bit more full circle to where I am today, one of the nation's underwriters, not named Stewart, was actually a client of ours. And through that experience, I always say that they paid for my MBA in title insurance, because they showed up and they said, hey, we have this problem. We'd love to figure out how to make title insurance more digital, more involved from a technology standpoint. And so I spent 2 years working on that problem, developing a solution for sort of co-created between the underwriter and BCG, and bringing it to market. And through that experience, I not only learned title, but I learned all the intricacies of the user journeys and what it was like for the title companies, what it was like for the buyers, for the sellers, for the real estate agents, and sort of enabled me to have this really great, deep sort of industry perspective, but from a how do you develop solutions for it. And it was actually through that experience that I identified some of this wire fraud problem and what was happening. And so that then sort of led to the next stage. But yeah, that was my early journey, and it's just always been from that like rooted cause of utilizing technology to solve problems and thinking about how exciting it can be when you get it right.
Two questions kind of stick out to me. First of all, is it true that Battle Creek, just generally, the MSA there, smells like cereal?
It is. It is. You have to go to believe it, but different cereal on different days. So that's what always threw you off. And it was like twice a month that the whole town just smelled like cookies. Yeah,
Like
it's
on
wild.
the surface, that feels exciting. But I'm not sure if like a continual inhalation of cookies is like, does that get old? Does it wear
You
on you?
know, the fact that it was only like twice a month, the cookie flavor was helpful. But yeah, definitely a strange thing going on
Okay.
down there.
Okay. Um, the other the other question that kind of comes to mind is very rarely do people sort of kind of with some background outside of the industry sort of enter into the industry uh, in sort of a new way. And I'm just curious, what were the things that surprised you about the title industry? Having worked across a whole bunch of different industries and seen a whole bunch of different things, what stood out to you as, because a lot of the things are the same, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things are sort of industry agnostic in terms of forces and issues and problems. But what was different, or what surprised you about this
Yeah.
industry?
So at BCG, whenever we would partner with a new customer or a new client, it was a really cool sort of like, think about it as like a corporate incubator, where the corporation that we were working with would bring 12 to 15 people from all across their different departments and fields, and we would bring 15 people across our different disciplines of business and design and product and engineering. And the first couple of weeks was just this like brain dump. Like the corporation had to help educate all of the people at BCG to best understand their problems, their issues, like the voice of their own customers and pain points. And one of those exercises was always a user journey map. And we would put up this giant piece of paper on the wall, and you would go through like, what is the user journey for this particular industry or this particular customer segment. And throughout my time at BCG, I got to do this for probably about a dozen different clients. And I think what stood out to me, I'll actually almost never forget the fact that the user journey map for the title industry was about 3 times as big as any other user journey map I had done. It literally took up like a hallway in our office at BCG because of all of the exceptions. Because of the, oh, well, it's this and that, but now, hold on, we just explained to you the whole user journey, but that was only for this region. Let's now go to this state or this region, or let's go to a scenario where, the buyer's paying with cash instead of with a mortgage. And it was just like, holy shit, there's a lot of complexity here as we start to think through this. And I think that always stuck with me as like, this is an industry, this is a consumer segment that is always going to have nuance, and we're always going to have to be making trade-offs or exceptions, especially when it comes to technology, of how do we try to solve for 80% of this, and then we'll circle back if there's an opportunity to solve for more. But I'd say that was like the biggest kind of like light bulb that I just never shook from was, wow, there's going to be, a lot of trade-offs that we're going to have to make as we think about this journey.
Yeah, it's a great point, and certainly something that I've reflected on before. I think sometimes progress in the industry is hard to make, and it's hard for innovation to take hold because of the overwhelming nature of the exceptions, right? But that's fascinating. So when you think about sort of originally the formation of Certified, what was the big problem that you all were trying to solve?
Yeah, I mean, look, so when I was at BCG and I'm working on a much sort of different problem or opportunity rather for the title industry, which is really to like, how do you digitize the closing experience? This idea or this problem of wire fraud came up. We explored it. So like our job as consultants in that sort of incubator was to come up with a whole slate of different business opportunities that our client could then go and explore as an extension of their business. And one was like a fully digitized closing experience. One in that slate was actually like, do we increase security? Do we try to go solve for this potential problem? And then there was another, 35 others that we presented to them. The wire fraud problem never really got a lot of exposure, or really we didn't dive too deep into it because it felt a little too far away from the core of the business of our customer at the time. But as luck or serendipity would have it, when I was at Kellogg, I worked with another consultant who was a legal consultant to Kellogg Cereal, whose name was Tom Cronkite. And he, as you know, Ian, runs a large title agency in the state of Michigan. We became really close in our journey of working for Kellogg. And years later, when I was at BCG working on this project with them, he called me and he said, hey, we just had this really bad wire fraud experience, and we wired more than $200,000 offshore. We thought it was a seller. Turns out it wasn't. And I'll never forget, he said, Tyler, I want to hire BCG to help me solve this problem. And I politely told Tom that he couldn't afford BCG, but that it sounded that I agreed it was a problem that he should try to solve. And he said, well, then why don't you come and solve it with me? And at the time, it was he got hit with his wire fraud in 2015. This phone conversation probably took place he told me when it first happened, but then we started to get serious about potentially solving it like late 2016, early 2017. And it just stuck with me. And what stuck with me the most was when I think about my career up to that point, I was solving a lot of problems for large corporations. And those large corporations, have a lot of shareholders and are measured on quarterly earnings, and everything felt very return based, and we were only going to solve the problem because it was going to make us more money, because that's what the expectation is for the business to grow. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when Tom called me, it was like this just very different feeling. This feeling of like, if I can't solve this problem, my business won't exist. It was more of an existential, like, I'll be out of business if this fraud problem persists. And he was so passionate about, recognizing the pain it caused his team and himself. And he just had this like unwavering belief that if it happened to him and his team with the level of sophistication it did, that this problem was going to continue to grow. And so it just started to consume me as I did my own research and was trying to understand, had trends like this occurred in other places, would fraud continue to grow at the scale that we both sort of assumed it would. And the underlying thread throughout that the whole time was just like, if it does, think about all of the people and businesses that are going to be impacted as a result. And you don't get many opportunities to both work on a big kind of hairy problem that also has a really positive reinforcement around it of being able to help people and protect livelihoods. And so there was just something about that kind of like opportunity space that I just found myself waking up in the middle of the night figuring out, is this just feels like a type of problem I've got to work on.
That's really neat, and no question the impact that you all have had to many consumers, right? And so it's cool, right? It's cool to work on problems that are good for the communities in which we live and exist. Give us a sense, like, how big is this problem in terms of dollars and risk? Like, just give us a sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I always go off of the FBI's IC3 report is typically like what we look at. There's a couple different ways that you can think about kind of like your total addressable risk. But last year alone, the FBI reported that $16.6 billion was lost to like business email compromise, essentially. And so that is just a wild figure when you think about total dollars, and everyone throws around like millions and billions and doesn't think much of it. But like when you really think about how much money that is, and the fact that that is mostly transfer of wealth from United States to other foreign nationals or folks who are trying to commit, crime against the United States, it's pretty staggering. If you break it down into real estate, it's a little bit harder to triangulate just because of the way that the FBI classifies, any of these scams. But these are scams. That's what I think is most interesting, or at least like most scary, is the fact that these aren't, people hacking into your computer and stealing your money while you're sleeping. These are like you're having some sort of an interaction, or someone's having some sort of an interaction with a live person on the other side of it that's convincing you to send money to the wrong place. And so there's a lot of effort and work that goes into the fraud side of this, but there's obviously huge gains to be had when we're talking about, $16.6 billion. And that number just has continued to go up. Actually, it's around March that they'll release their next report. So it'll be interesting to see what 2025 looked like. But yeah, the number I just shared was actually the 2024 number.